Thank you.
Julia, I want to start with you. What type of field work did your group do?
We did a lot. We did some rivershed mapping. So we looked at riverbeds and the different sediment output. We looked at glacier outputs, glacial till. We looked at lots of volcanoes and cinder cones. We also got to go into a lava tunnel and look at the different solidified lava flows within the rock, which was really, really cool.
Yeah, I just think of all the opportunities that Iceland would present that wouldn't be available to you here in Canada.
Yeah, it's a different kind of rock than what the majority of Canada is, so it was really cool to experience that.
Simona, did you do the same field research or were you doing something different? The same.
Yeah, so most of the group, we were all doing the same thing at the same time. I think it was just the once we were split up, or we would do some more smaller group work too, but for the most part it was the same rocks. We were looking, well, obviously throughout the trip, different rocks, but,
What surprised you the most during that research component?
I think for me it was seeing how many rocks had come from relatively fresh lava, right? Like thousands of years old versus like in Canada and Windsor too. It was like Windsor's so flat compared to all the mountains in Iceland. I think for me seeing that almost whole new dimension of the world, like how it can be so different, I think that was the thing that most surprised me.
Well, Iceland was the last place on Earth to be settled by humans. Did that play a role at all in your research while you were there?
Yeah, we actually got to go to an archaeological dig site where the head of the dig site actually gave us a lecture on how Iceland was first settled by, I believe it was Norway. Mm-hmm. They came from Norway. There was also some kidnapping of some Irish and British Isles women. So that was interesting to learn, but definitely a big part of the history of the country.
And Simona, I imagine a trip like this gives you new skills with field work and an appreciation for Iceland as landforms in the country. But how now that you're back, will that change how you approach your studies?
I think for me, the biggest part was, in terms of learning, was learning to adapt to new people, right? I hadn't known most of the other students and the professors who went on this trip, but it was really cool to all be together for quite a few days and work together. A lot of us this kind of trip, the geology, it was our first time seeing it. I had never studied geology before this semester. So I think also collaboration and like learning something new pretty quickly was a big thing I learned. So
I also think when I think of Iceland, I think of the food being very different and very unique. What was that like?
It was really interesting. There was a ton of fish because it's an island. But I think when people think of Iceland, they typically think of the delicacies that a lot of foreigners go there to try, like fermented shark and puffin meat. But actually, the fermented shark, we learned that it was Greenland shark that's fermented. And so Greenland sharks are hundreds of years old. And so we didn't partake in that because we felt bad about that. But it was interesting to see all of the different things that we could have tried.
Right. Did you swim in the hot springs?
we did.
What was that like?
It was so cool. It's pretty cold, like maximum 10 degrees while we were there. But, being able to swim outside in the warm, basically naturally warm water, that was really interesting. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And we went to the Sky Lagoon, which is a very big spa there. And we did their 7-step ritual, which included a sauna and a scrub. And that was really cool. We were hoping we'd get to go to the Blue Lagoon as well, but we didn't because of the recent eruption that had just happened. The lagoon was closing intermittently because of gases in the air, and so we didn't want to book that and then have it canceled, but the Sky Lagoon was very cool.
Yeah. Any other surprises?
I think the eruption that happened while we were there was probably the coolest part.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How close were you?
We were very close. We were about an hour away drive. It was I can't pronounce the name of the volcano, but it was near a town called Grindavik, and we were in Reykjavik at the time, which is about an hour away. And at the time when it happened, we were on a boat whale watching, so we could see that from the water, and it was very cool to
So
see.
you could see the actual eruption?
Yeah, so we couldn't see the lava from the boat, but we could see the big
smoke?
cloud, and it looked like a giant white, almost mushroom. It was really cool to see, especially being there on a geology trip, studying volcanic activity.
Had you thought of doing sort of international exploration in geology before this trip?
Absolutely, for me, I not necessarily geology, but definitely international conservation work. Because I am in environmental science and I'm really passionate about conservation. And this was kind of my first step into going into the world and seeing the different parts of the planet.
Yeah. What about you? Does this open your eyes to the amount you can learn if you leave your surroundings and go somewhere else?
Absolutely. I was never expecting I would, learn much about environmental science going into university as a biomedical science major. But I think this trip really changed me and thinking about what kinds of courses or what kinds of things I would like to take in the future. Definitely international experiences, because you never know what you can learn, right? Like I gained a huge perspective in terms of like not just the world around me, but also how I can learn with new people, how I can learn new topics, and how eye-opening it is, because from now on I travel, I'm thinking about geology too when we see cool rocks. But yeah, absolutely new other international experiences, extremely beneficial, and I would do it in the future if I could.
Really quickly, because I need to ask this, I feel, but Iceland is known as being one of the front runners when it comes to being eco-friendly. Did you get to see some of the underground ways that they're preserving energy while you were there, or was that
No,
next time's trip?
unfortunately, we weren't able to tour a geothermal plant. I was really hoping we would get to, but there's just so much to do in Iceland that we didn't get the
10
opportunity
days is
to.
just not enough.
No, it's not.
I know.
But definitely next trip.
Next trip, and then come back and tell me, because I'm fascinated. I would just want to see it myself, and I can't. So I'm sending you, and then you come back and you tell us. That's how it works.
For sure.
Thanks so much for coming in, guys. Appreciate
Thank
this.
you. Thank you.
Julia Rutley is a third-year environmental science student. She just wrapped up her third year. And Simona Bezanu is just completing her first year in biomedical science. Both ladies just returning from a trip to Iceland. They were among 12 students from the Faculty of Science at the University of Windsor.